Hello and good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, October 11th, 2021. I now call the Reapportionment Commission meeting to order. Mr. Padilla, please proceed with roll call.
Commissioner Caparrós,
Present.
Commissioner Douglas,
Present.
Commissioner Hussey Burdick,
Present.
Commissioner Lau,
Present.
Commissioner Mao,
Here.
Commissioner Quevedo Jr.,
Present.
Commissioner Shigemasa,
Present.
Commissioner Singh,
Present.
Chair Iona.
Present.
9 members present, Chair.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here today and for our second public hearing. I again want to remind all of you that the commission will only be hearing remote oral testimony from the public today. We currently have some written testimony that obviously will be taken into consideration. Commissioner members can ask questions of those of you who are testifying. However, there'll be no discussion, action, or decision-making on any of the testimonies submitted during public hearing. Once all of the testifiers have testified, the public hearing will be adjourned. Members, your meeting packets contain the written testimony submitted, as I mentioned earlier, for today's hearing. Please use the maps, though, provided to you at our last public hearing on October 7th, 2021. That's in the effort of conserving some resources here. The purpose of this public hearing is to afford all interested persons the opportunity to be heard by submitting views, arguments, or data orally via interactive video conference. And before we start our meeting, I do have some procedural announcements to make. Pursuant to Governor David Ige's emergency proclamation related to the COVID-19 response issued on August 5th, 2021, relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, in order to allow public participation in a manner consistent with safe practices and social distancing requirements, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. These are some reminders and tips. As an attendee of the meeting, you are initially set with view only. Staff will bring you into the meeting at a time you are called to testify. Please video conference from a quiet place or quiet location if possible. If you're also watching the proceeding on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 3-minute presentation. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. For those that may be joining us by telephone only, which I don't think we have any at this point in time, I do not have your name, so I will identify you by the prefix of your phone number. Once all of the remote testifiers have testified, I will close remote testimony. Written testimonies, as I mentioned earlier, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available as public documents on the city's website. So as a courtesy, I remind everyone to please turn off their cell phones for the duration of this meeting. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item number 3. Public hearing, public comments on A, Kaena Makapu Plan Member Draft 1, Kaena Makapu Plan Member Draft 2, that's B, and C, Modified Existing District Plan. So testifiers, please be ready, knowing that technical issues can happen, and we did have that happen last week. We'll give you a few moments to try to resolve whatever it may be the problem. However, if those issues cannot be resolved, we have to move on, which we did. When your name is called or your phone pretext, please state your name for the record and the agenda item or items you are testifying on. So we have I have 3. Okay, they are on. So we will start with our first testifier, which is Lorna Strand.
Hello, my name is Laura
Hello.
Strand. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, Ms. Strand.
Thank you very much. I am a resident of Aiea, and I live on Aiea Heights. My family moved to Aiea in 1960. I'm here to speak in support for either the Kaena Makapu Plans 1 and 2. I support that configuration over the modified existing plan. While I wish that IAEA could be served as a whole by one member of City Council, I believe that plans 1 and 2 afford the opportunity to be tied to the communities to the east and west of IAEA and extend along Pearl Harbor in 2 council districts. The modified existing plan chops IAEA into 3 council districts as it now exists. As we all know, IAEA is a very traditional community. While we think of it as a plantation community, it really was a very vibrant Native Hawaiian community where people who lived on the shore and fed off the riches of Pearl Harbor and the springs of the water springs of the middle part of Aiea all the way up to the Aiea Heights, where the mango and lychee trees are still existing from way back when, all the way up to the Ke'iwa Heiau, which is a sanctuary for all of us in Aiea. We think along Mauka to Makai, Makai to Mauka ways. The modified existing plan, however, starts to chop us up. A freeway already divides our community, and the current city council district map chops us even more. My home is in the same council district as my Uncle Frank's home. He lives on Makiki Street at the base of Round Top Drive. His community and my community, while we love each other, we realize that we rarely see each other much because we are so separated by distance. We really don't have much in common with our communities. Neither does the Kaka'ako high rises in modified existing or the Nu'uanu Valley mansions that are in the modified existing plan with those those areas in Aiea as they now exist. I believe that the modified existing plan violates the spirit of the charter section 3-1033B, which calls for contiguous and compact districts. I do not believe that we are actually contiguous communities. The modified existing plan stretches also over so many different neighborhood boards. I counted them. Out of the 36, I think, neighborhood boards that exist, there are 7 or 8 neighborhood boards that are in the modified existing plan for the current District 6 existing plan District F. And that's just a lot for a member of council to have to serve in all of those neighborhood boards and give them the due attention that they deserve. The additional thing is that all around the communities of Pearl Harbor, we consider Pearl Harbor as our Makai. We are focused on Pearl Harbor. So many people work there. We see it every day. The bike lines along Pearl Harbor are kept up by the Lions Club and other community groups, so that the Kupuna can do their daily walks and there can be bike service to the work. We care about the stadium. We care about the farms that are all along the rich springs that are there, and we care about Hart and all of the building that will happen around the stadium and all of the stops along the Hart route. And right now, the modified existing plan puts us in a district that basically has nothing to do with the rail system. I know that there were questions at the last meeting, a hearing about disenfranchisement. And I think that the whole basis of the work of this commission is actually to change borders, to change lines. With the change of lines, there will by necessity be people who will not be in the same district again. So I believe that the charter does not have provision for special elections to accommodate changes in district lines based on county reapportionments, such as the state does for the state Senate's reapportionment process. There will be elections in 2022 for those state Senate seats that for only a 2-year term rather than a 4-year term. All state Senate seats will be up for election. This is something that the state is somehow taken into consideration, and perhaps this commission should recommend a charter amendment addressing disenfranchisement to support the work of future reapportionment commissions. But the question of disenfranchisement should really not infringe upon the work of this commission, since there is nothing in the commission's guidelines or the charter to support it. Mahalo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments for Ms. Strand?
Commissioner Douglas, thank you, Ms. Strand, for your testimony. So you mentioned there's the two, one or two, the draft, the Kanamakapu are your preferences. Between the two, do you have a preference for either one over the other?
Actually, since I live on Aya Heights, I would rather have the plan that would have more of Aya in the district that I live in. But basically, both plans divide Aya. And I wish that we could have a plan where communities like Aya could be as a whole. But if we have to be divided, then I think that I will trust the commission to make a decision for the whole county as to which plan would be better suited. But as long as Aya has to be divided, either one would be okay, because either one, somebody in Aya is going to miss the other section of it.
See.
And also, by the way, there are very strong neighborhood boards in both Aya and Pearl City. It would be great for Aya, all of Aya, to be serviced. We can by strong boards, and so I trust, because there are such strong neighborhood boards, that everybody in Aya could be serviced.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Strand. Could you, or maybe one of the commissioners, remind me how many total neighborhood boards there are in our county?
Are you asking for
Yeah.
how many neighborhood boards in the
On
Oahu
the-
County, Honolulu County?
Yeah, Honolulu County.
I don't know. Shigewasa, do you know? Tell me you're gonna Google it.
I'm not a member of the neighborhood board commission that oversees all the boards, but I'll definitely run a count right now.
I think there are 36 with 3 that are not yet open, like Mauna Loa is not yet functioning.
Okay, so 36 total. There are 9 council districts. So by virtue of that, you would have average out 4 per district. You kind of like that. That would be nice. I'm just addressing your 1, 2, 3, your 4th point that you made here. And I think we have a few superhero council members who do that, and not just in District 6, but I think even in District 9, there are quite a few in various areas of the island.
One
So
of the things.
that is a consideration, Ms. Strand.
Thank you. May I address that, because I did call my neighborhood board about
Yes.
it. What I asked about that, can a council member who is representing only a few, like in our case for District 33, only 2 precincts represent the whole of District 33. And basically what happens is that they do come, they do serve, but they only talk about those things that are relevant to those precincts that they represent.
I think that's on the state side regarding precincts and those districts, but
That's how we are divided though. And
yes.
currently 2 of the 6 precincts in our IAEA House district are in the Council District 6.
Okay. And then regarding your last comments on disenfranchisement, you don't think that consequences, like considering the consequences, are a part of decision making?
Yes, but it's not, it shouldn't drive. I believe that there are very specific guidelines that the charter requires, and those are the ones that should be most important to follow. While the question of disenfranchisement is a good one, a good question to put before them, it's clear that somehow through the charter, that is not an issue that's in the charter. And I think that it's a good recommendation to make. I wish that we could be like the state and have all districts up for election in 2022 with the odd districts only up for 2 years.
Okay. I'll make note of that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Ms. Strand. That's all I have for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Shigemasa. Thank you, Ms. Strand, Mrs. Strand, for joining us this evening, and thank you for your testimony. I just wanted to confirm, I know you made a mention that you'd like to see all of IAEA into one community. I want to just understand the border that you would, do you believe it's the neighborhood board boundary border of IAEA neighborhood board that it should follow?
You know, when it comes to the city council, yes, I do, because the neighborhood boards, my mom was the first president of the IAEA neighborhood board. So I've been indoctrinated about the gifts of the neighborhood board all my life practically. And I think that the concept of the neighborhood board is that this is your city hall. I mean, this is your county office. This is where you go when you want to address something that is a matter to you. So if you've got good neighborhood boards that are solid, they do the work, and they have good elections, they're representative of the community, then shouldn't that align with the city council members who are actually representing these people? Because this is the conduit through which information from the community is getting actually to the city councilman or to the city. It's through the neighborhood board. Now, I don't know how other neighborhood boards are, how they function, and if there might be some strong ones and some weak ones. But if you're going to have neighborhood boards that are there to serve in alignment with the city and county, then shouldn't there be representation that align with them as well?
Thank you, Mrs. Strand. Hypothetically, if we were not able to achieve putting all of IAEA due to deviation and population growth into one, you would still be in support of a plan that went from, as in your testimony says here, design from Mauka to Mackay that'll allow us to work with city council members who envision the needs of the whole community. Is that correct?
Yeah, and maybe it's because my dad in 1955 decided to move to Aiea to practice dentistry. His uncle lived on Kahale Street and said, "You got to come to Aiea because we no more dentists." So he did. And Kahale Street at the time was gravel road. Yeah. And so my parents lived through the whole construct building of Aiea and the closing of the plantation. And then all of a sudden, when the freeway came through and the big road started to, Mauna Loa Road got wider and the freeway came through, all of a sudden there was a border, a superficial border, a line, another line that cut through the community. But the people who live there don't think of it as divided. They think of it as from Pearl Harbor up to the Heiau. I mean, that's where we live. And you know, you live in Aiea Heights, but you shop at Times down the hill. You know, we think of it as a community, and it's unfortunate that borders have done this to us, but you know, like freeways have done this to us. But I got to tell you, every morning from Aiea Heights, from my house, I look out at Pearl Harbor. And my dad did too. And we used to, you know, he would give me a lowdown on, oh, the carrier came in today and look at that. You know, Pearl Harbor is a big deal for us.
Thank you so much for your testimony. All the questions I have, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Strand, very much for your testimony and your involvement in this. We really appreciate it. Our next testifier will be Cameron Deptula. Is that correct?
Yes, that's good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, awesome, perfect. So, aloha, my name is Cameron Deptula. I am a community leader, public policy advocate, and current university student from Mililani Mauka. And I'm here today before you all to testify, you know, comments and also opposition to the current 3 proposed redistricting maps, for the reason that they all split Mililani Town from Mililani Mauka. You know, as someone who's called Mililani Mauka and Mililani Town, you know, his home for, you know, my entire life, you know, my older siblings as well, right after my parents got married, they settled in Mililani. You know, Mililani is a deep part of my identity, and, you know, I feel strongly towards the community there. So, you know, to see it again be split up, you know, that's very disheartening for me. And, you know, just to paint a picture maybe a little bit about living in Mililani, for, you know, people who, I mean, I'm sure some of you may not have even gone up to Mililani Mauka before, but, you know, we have no grocery store up in Mililani Mauka. So, you know, if you were to, you know, let's say you were a neighbor in my neighborhood living on my street, if you were to catch the bus or ride your bike or even drive your car down a city and county road in order to just grab groceries or just go, you know, pick up some supplies, you wouldn't be going to Wahiawa Town or the North Shore or Laie for that matter, in order to pick up these goods. You'd be going to Mililani Town, either at the Mililani Town Center or the Mililani Shopping Center, or even at the very far end of Mililani Town at Safeway over there, in order to pick up your supplies. And this is all just to say that Mililani itself is a fully in community, unlike many other on the island. Most daily life will happen in Mililani, and most issues affecting the people living in Mililani are Mililani issues, right? You know, you're catching your bus to go down to the Mililani Town Center. You know, you're making your commute if you're a student, either from the bottom of Mililani Town up into Mililani Mauka at the very top to go to the intermediate school, or opposite, from the very top of Mililani Mauka, you know, going down into town in order to get to the high school. So, you know, seeing Mililani split up again, I feel like that's a really big, you know, obstacle for Mililani residents who are trying to deal with these Mililani issues. You know, it's very hard to coordinate with multiple council members. And a lot of times by being pushed into different council districts, often it feels like the council members representing Mililani do not reflect Mililani values. You know, and that especially holds true for my council district, which is District 2. You know, we're suburban Mililani Mauka, sort of being thrown in with a primarily rural district. And there's nothing wrong with a rural district. It's just that, you know, the issues from the day to day are very different. And the leaders that are elected to that district, you know, it feels different from Mililani. So, you know, I see this as a challenge for the community dealing with Mililani specific problems such as, you know, traffic, you know, being excluded from a lot of the mass transit plans going on, you know, supporting small businesses within Mililani, you know, which serve as the backbone for our community really there. And also, you know, a growing problem, which is homelessness in Mililani. And it's very different from what has happened in Wahiawa or the North Shore. And this is a new phenomenon, and it's Mililani specific. So it really doesn't make sense splitting up Mililani, to me at least. So, you know, in the same way that I'm sure, you know, this commission would probably not consider splitting up Hawaii Kai, or would not, you know, consider cleaving, you know, Manoa in half along East Manoa Road. I feel strongly that, you know, I urge the commission to consider keeping Mililani intact this time around. But, you know, with that, I'd like to conclude my testimony, and I'd like to thank you all for your service for this very important commission. And for all of your work. So mahalo.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Mr. Deptula, thank you very much. We really appreciate your participation and interest in this process. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next testifier is Marion Poirier.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Thank you. Chair Iona and commissioners, my name is Marion Poirier, and my testimony follows. In carrying out your important mission of public import, please do not separate Mililani Town from Mililani Mauka. Together, they are well known as a favored place to be and a proud place to be from. More importantly, perhaps, they truly function together as a community in all senses and meaning of the word. For example, the Mililani High School and Mililani Mauka Middle School service both the town and the Mauka area. So our children are dispersed to both locations. So that is a reason, and an important reason, why parents need to have common identity. And then my husband Richard and I, as original owners and current occupants on the Mililani town side, we've watched Mililani grow from day one. There were 200 houses in Mililani when we moved, and now we have over 60,000 people. And it's truly been a blessing to participate in the growth of Mililani. And so I would repeat that the reason for my testimony this evening is that I want to see Mililani Mauka and Mililani Town looked at as a community and an entity unto itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Poirier. Questions?
Thank you for your, Commissioner Shigemasa. Thank you for your testimony, Mrs. Poirier. I have a question in regards to your consideration of Mililani and what Mililani would be. Do you feel or do you believe that Waipio Acres, Mele Manu, and Launani Valley, Mililani Tech Park should also be included in Mililani Town and Mililani Mauka, or separated?
You know, that is a very good question. I don't have any reason to not want to include them, but not at the expense of splitting up Mililani Mauka and Mililani Town. As long as Mililani is an entity in and of itself, then those areas that are married to Mililani, so to speak, and the people there do use Mililani retail and other provisions. That is fine. Don't object to that at all. But the goal is to keep Mililani as a unit.
Is that it, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mrs. Poirier. That's all. Thank you so much.
Mrs. Poirier, thank you very much for your input. We really appreciate it sincerely, and thank you for having an interest in the process. Our next testifier is Charisse Villanueva.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charisse. I'm a resident of the Kalihi Palama area, and I just wanted to say that I'm in support of the modified existing districts. However, should one of the other plans of the Kaena/Makapu'u maps go through, I just wanted to request specifically for District G if there's any way to adjust the boundary up to H1 freeway. So everything Makai of H1 freeway to be included as part of District G. That's all.
Okay, any questions?
Hi, Ms. Villanueva. This is Commissioner Douglas.
Hi.
How do you view you're in Kalihi Palama, so could you share with the commission how you view your district that you currently are in? Because we've heard testimony the other way in favor of the Kaena Makapu'u, either a draft, the member draft or the original for the because of Ahupua'o, but you're testifying in favor of the modified existing coming from Kalihi Palama. So how do you view like the identity of your district, or what makes up your community that you favor this modified existing?
Well, to be honest, through personal experience, I like the council member who represents us. She's been doing a great job in supporting our community.
I see. Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Commissioner Shigemasa, thank you so much, Mrs. Villanueva, for joining us and providing testimony this evening. Being that if we do adjust maps, borders may have to change on either the western or the eastern side of the lower of the H1 freeway. Where would you suggest your eastern border to be if lines were to be adjusted? So currently, the council district sits at Alapar River Street. If there was a need to adjust deviation for population growth, if we would have to push the other district more west to include what you're requesting, what would you suggest to be the western boundary? Would you say, and I'm just naming things, Liliha, Kalihi Street, Off-Tailing?
Liliha Street.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
I think, this commission has the responsibility to try to take everybody's comments into what maps we truly decided to end. And I think it's great so that we have this information from you. So if we do look at redrafting the map as you requested, we kind of know what you would favor. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Ms. Villanueva. We really appreciate your participation and, of course, your interest in this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next testifier is Bart Dame.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I got to say, watching this hearing and listening to the interaction of the commissioners to each other, as well as to the testifiers, is impressive to me. And I want to thank you for your service. You guys have a tough job. You have to draw a line somewhere. You're going to end up splitting communities. There's no real, you're not going to make everybody happy. And I respect you for taking on that burden. My preference is one of the kind of point Makapu'u plans rather than the existing districts. And I'm persuaded by the notion of having an orientation Mauka Makai. And it's not just out of deference to traditional Hawaiian ways of doing things, but I think the Ahupua'a concept existed because it made sense. It's how, in those days, they oriented their lives. And there's much about it that is still perpetuates today. Of course, not everybody fits in a pie-shaped wedge with a valley going onto a coastal plain. But for those that do, you walk down out of the valley, you get on the bus, the water comes down from the hillside and it flows into the canals and then goes down to the ocean. These are activities that it makes sense to have a comprehensive management approach on. So to some extent, I think there's still validity in the Mauka Makai orientation. I also have trouble with, I heard Lorna Strand's testimony about the district going from Makiki to Aiea. That seemed to be a stretch, which I think one of the other two plans would be better. I'm not sure which of the plans is better. I looked at, for example, what happens with the water coming out of Manoa and it hits the Alawai. And should the district include the area around Date Street, or should it include the high rise around the entrance of the Alawai Canal? I don't know. I would rather have the residents of the area speak to that rather than somebody like me. But either of those plans would be acceptable to me. I listened to Commissioners Bert Lau and Chase Shigemasa, and I thought they were both very thoughtful. I enjoyed their conversations with each other as they tried to wrestle with making compromises and reaching agreement. I also listened to Commissioner Douglas, and I had a hard time believing what he was saying was accurate. I thought maybe he misunderstood the law when he talked about disenfranchisement. But then I went back and I looked at the historical record, and after the 2001 reapportionment, all council members, all 9 council members had to run for re-election, some for 2 years, some for 4 years. And then last time it was only half the commissioners. And so then I went back and I watched the video of Glenn Takahashi briefing you folks on the day that you were confirmed and explaining how half of the people will be holdovers. And that doesn't make sense to me. I'm more familiar with the state reapportionment side of this. And it seems like the state's approach is the wiser one, that every senator, regardless of where they are in their 4-year term, has to run for re-election. Some run for 2-year terms, some run for 4-year terms. And as I read the city charter, it didn't seem like it was very well written in terms of giving guidance on this. There's probably some legislative history that explains it. But is it possible for this body to amend to your report to the council a recommendation that the charter be amended so that all council members some run for 2 years, some run for 4 years, rather than put this burden and this pressure on you folks to factor that in? Because I agree with Lorna Strand that there already are criteria for reapportionment that are tough to balance, of compactness and contiguousness and distinctive boundaries and such. And I don't think you should be blackmailed by this sort of arbitrary, I think, big puka in the law that says that half of them are holdover because they're even or odd districts. That seems rather absurd and arbitrary. So I would recommend that. And again, I want to thank you for your service, and this meeting confirmed that again by listening to you folks talk to each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dame. Great observations on a lot of different aspects of what's going on right now. Any questions, comments for Mr. Dame? And by the way, Mr. Dame, don't worry, we will take up your concerns and your questions, but this is not the time to do it. So anyway, any questions, commissioners, comments? If not, Mr. Dame, thank you again. I know you've been a big part of this process, and we really appreciate your input and your interest in it.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Next testifier is Braden Wilkerson.
Good evening, commissioners. Hold on, just getting everything set up here. So just following up on last week's testimony, and I have actually really appreciated and enjoyed the testimony that was offered tonight and the feedback that's gone back and forth, sort of relieving to hear more sort of public testimony to address a lot of these concerns. I just want to restate my position. I am in favor again of either Ka'ena Makapu'u draft plans, either one or two. My preference is for Plan 1 as a district of resident of Council District 1. I think it preserves portions of Ewa Gentry with Old Ewa to maintain some semblance of the two distinct communities as a whole. But, you know, again, I am testifying in strong opposition to the modified existing plan, which for stated reasons in our last meeting, I think is a poor plan for a variety of reasons, including deviation, numbers, and the fact that it does not create or allow for communities of similar interest. And what was also brought up, and is also a term commonly referenced in reapportionment processes, is the desire to create compact and contiguous districts, which again, the Ka'ena Makapu'u plans do better and more appropriately in not only addressing population, but also creating communities of similar and shared interest. One of the comments, and I think the ongoing questions that have come up even tonight, is about the kind of the conversation around disenfranchisement, which I, again, speaking to other testifiers who also have testified, and I agree with the sentiments that have already been expressed. I don't think that there is a large public concern about disenfranchisement. I think what the commissioners need to consider is that by making the appropriate adjustments, they give communities and people the ability to be enfranchised that have previously not been, right? So when you look at communities like Mililani Mauka or Ahuimanu and Kahaluu and Ewa and Ewa Gentry, or some of the other communities that are pleading to be retained or to be oriented in a direction and in a way that preserves their shared values and sort of lived experience, I think that is the far greater opportunity that you have before you, and the responsibility and obligation that you ultimately have, right? You have the unique opportunity to draw lines and to orient communities in a way that they have historically not have the privilege or the benefit of being oriented in. So I would ask you to consider that you are enfranchising people and organizing communities more appropriately. Again, with population being the key or critical factor. I think that's largely what I'd like to end on tonight. I do have some other thoughts just about the weight and importance of what you guys are doing, right? I think some of this gets lost in the minutia and the detail and the data of politicking, but reapportionment ultimately is about the equal redistribution of political power, money, and ultimately representation. So I would encourage and empower you as a body to make difficult decisions, to do what is right, to act according to your character and your conscience, to really reshape and redraw these lines according to not only the city charter, but in keeping with our federal and state constitutions. I did want to address one final point. Most of the time I am sitting there with you in the room behind you as a member of the council staff. For those of you who are not familiar, I am actually a policy director for Councilmember Tupola, who is the chair of the Committee on Executive Matters and Legal Affairs, which deals primarily with charter amendments and constitutional amendments to the city charter. This actually is a constitutional question that we were faced with when reviewing the responsibilities of the Charter Commission. And so if the commission is interested in proposing after its adoption of this map, potential charter amendment to reform the method in which we elect representatives after the decennial census, please put that in writing and know that I ultimately, on behalf of Councilmember Topola and her committee, would forward that on behalf of the Honolulu City Council. We would happily do that with your recommendations. So please make good decisions. Appreciate the comments and the back and forth tonight.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Appreciate your participation in this process. We have one person on the telephone, testify by telephone with the prefix 497.
But see, the thing, I don't trust anybody in one well, Cameron really, so eloquent. But I was very good. Oh, I answered the shit.
Could you go offline and let them know that can't they're online right now. One person needs to be speaking. For the record, the person who is testifying via telephone with the prefix 497, now is your time to testify on whatever issues you want to testify to regarding our agenda. But it can only be one person, and please do it as clearly as possible. But if we can't make that happen right now, I'm sorry, we're going to have to end the telephone call. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. We're going to end the call. Thank you. Yeah, I need to ask the clerk, is there anyone else standing by who would like to testify? No? Okay. There being no, this concludes the remote portion of our oral testimony. And as such, we are now closing that portion of the agenda. We now move on to agenda item number 4, announcements. Commissioners, our next meeting will be on Tuesday, October 26, 2021 at 5 p.m. Please note the time, 5 p.m. Again, right here at Honolulu Holly. And we will review, discuss, and act upon as appropriate all of the comments that you've heard in the past 2 public hearings, amendments to the maps that were presented at public hearings, which is what I'm referring to, adoption of the final plan, preparation of the final report of the 2021 Reapportionment Commission, and filing of the adopted redistricting plan with the city clerk. Again, with this to review, discuss, and act upon as appropriate. Okay? Yes.
Chair Commissioner Hussey Burdick, can we add to that agenda a proposal, a discussion around perhaps submitting recommendations to revise the charter? As a couple of our testifiers
We
today have
can,
mentioned?
we can add that too. We can add that to the agenda.
Commissioner Lau, I had a question with regard to making adjustments to any of the three maps to address any of the concerns raised by the testifiers. Is that an option, or are we looking
It's
at?
an option. I mean, we're going to discuss it, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
everybody, we had various
Right.
recommendations and suggestions, et
Okay.
cetera.
All right.
And we'll discuss that at the pleasure of the commission. And obviously, we'll, if somebody's compelled to make a move for something that needs to be amended, it'll be done. So we'll go through that same process, the motion, second, vote on it, et cetera, if it's appropriate at that point in time. But it'll be on the three maps that we have now under consideration.
A variation of it based
Yeah, I
on
mean,
testimony?
that's what they've been commenting on,
Right.
right? Yeah.
So my question is then, if in the interim, taking into account some of the considerations raised, is there some room for the commissioners to meet with staff again to look at how the changes are affect the deviation rate? Or is that something, because otherwise we might be at this point, after next meeting's thing about going out and coming up with revisions.
Yeah, which is, I think, is the process, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And
just
so,
checking.
because, and I think by now, because you've all worked with the plans, you kind of know if you're going to make an amendment, or if you're going to make a change to what's existing right now, you kind of know what direction it's going to go on in. I'm not saying that you base it on that. All I'm saying is that the process has been such that we take up the amendments, because if it's not approved by a majority of the commissioners, and there's no need to be talking about it between now and the next meeting. If it's approved and we have to make an adjustment, we'll have another meeting. We'll just have another meeting. Just bear in mind our timeline, though. That's my concern. I mean, that's Mike Fuliano, but I'll keep you guys on task on that, right? I'll keep you on track on that. But just bear that in mind. So we're not saying next week is the final meeting. It's scheduled right now as the final meeting. And if we can come to a consensus at that point in time, or a majority, I should say, on a map that we want to that we want to adopt, then so be it. Okay, but we will have that discussion. If you look at the minutes of all the previous, the last two commissions, you're going to see that they had that discussion on that last meeting of when after they took public testimony, they took it into consideration, they voted on it, or they didn't have a motion on it, or they had a motion on it, and then they decided accordingly. Go ahead.
Commissioner Shigemasa, would it be the chair's recommendation to prepare such amendments for the next meeting?
No, it's something that we got to discuss, right? I mean, you've heard all of this testimony. I didn't count them up, but well
So
over,
if
well over 10.
in the case that from the testimony that we've heard, to bring to the next meeting an amended map with the testimony that we've just heard in mind to that next meeting, since it is some time away.
That's what he was asking. And I said, all we're going to take up at the next meeting is the proposed amendments that some of the testifiers had. For instance, most of them spoke either in favor of or in, opposition to the certain maps.
I guess
Very few had specific amendments to make unless it was asked by the commissioners. So based on that, you can look at you can decide what you think might be appropriate for that amendment. And then at next week's hearing, this is where you put it in front of the other commissioners and being more specific than
Could you
what it is.
clarify if I'm putting the idea in front of the commission?
Yeah.
Or I'm putting the map?
No,
With
you're not putting the map. You're putting the amendment that's being proposed
But how do we
based upon.
how do I make a educated amendment if I don't have the deviation and the map in front of me?
That's what I'm talking about. We don't know what it's going to be. I mean, I don't want you going to the staff right now and you got all these different proposals and you come up with 10 and you say, okay, make these 10 deviations for me. and they go through everything that they got to do, and you come back and nobody wants to accept any of those. Okay, so what you got to do is look at what you have in front of you. Everybody has testified. Like I said, most of this is either in opposition or in in favor of a particular map. And I think the most testimony, you can agree or disagree with, has been from people from Mililani. They obviously had a campaign going where they want Mililani as one. Now, upon questioning by the commissioners, some say, well, we want it to be with Pro C, but not everybody said that. Okay, so, but they said, we just want it to be one. Then you had one that said, well, we don't want YPO. Well, YPO Acres can be with it, but, they're married to us. And so, but we want Mililani Town. So you take all of that into consideration, and you look at what we have in front of us, and you can make suggestions, or I should say recommendations, in regards to, okay, we would ask, because like I said, you pretty much know if you're going to amend the map one way or the other. Let's say we put Mililani with the District 8. I think it's District 8, right? That's Representative Council Member Elefante. And we put it with that. You see which way you're going to have to make adjustments to the population.
Well, I don't think that's fair.
Oh, I'm
a
not,
fair
I'm just
statement.
saying is you have an idea. We're not doing it on that. That's why I just told it that. We're not going to do it that way. But you have an idea. So when you come here, we don't take as much, we just don't take up time that we don't need to take up for something that's just not going to happen. You understand? Am I making myself clear on that? So I'm not saying you're precluded from bringing up amendments, but I'm not going to allow, you to go to staff right now with 10 different versions and say, come up with these 10 different plans just in case.
If we were to go to staff with one plan from what we heard,
Well, again, we can do that after the next meeting if that's what everybody wants. The majority of the members might not want that. They might want to just adopt draft number 1 or draft number 2 or modify. They just might want to do that
I don't think
as is, right?
I just don't feel that that's a fair statement to say here. Majority of the members might feel that way. I feel that we should be provided the opportunity.
And you are being provided that opportunity. I'm not saying you're not provided that opportunity. All I'm saying is that from between now and the next meeting, I'm not going to allow you to make that request to staff in regards to something that you now have an idea of that should be drafted as a map.
Okay.
If you do come up with that and all the members agree to it here at the next meeting, we can have another meeting on that, because again, we're going to have to allow the public to comment on it,
Thank you, Chair.
right? Yes.
Sure. Commissioner Hussey Burdick, don't you think it would be a little bit more time, wouldn't it save a little bit more time if we had a proposed map to discuss next meeting, in which case then we could discuss the possibility of moving that new map, one map, not 10, forward for more public discussion, rather than having a discussion next meeting to decide whether or not to look at a new map, to decide whether or not to have a second meeting to get public feedback on that map?
No, simply because, again, we don't know what amendment, or if there are any changes that the majority of the commissioners want. I don't know that right now. So, and we're not going to discuss that right now. It's not on the agenda. And it's not a part of what we're going to do right now, because we're supposed to be right now processing all of the comments that have been made by the public, so that you can come back at the next meeting and now we can discuss it. And if you want to you say, well, based on this testimony, this is the suggestion that they made. Would the commissioners feel comfortable in adopting this and having this basically, I guess, drafted as a new amendment to draft number 1 or draft number 2 or modified or whatever it might be, right? And then we can vote on that. And if it comes out okay, if it comes out as majority, then that's what we do.
Yeah, so I think what my fellow commissioners are saying is that they're hearing the testimony, they're hearing that there do need to be changes made, and they're wanting to think
Well,
about these changes, but it's hard to know.
I heard 1,
Excuse
I
me,
heard 2,
Chair?
and I heard 3.
I'm speaking. They wanted to see how these changes would play out with the deviation, and it's really hard to do that without the software that we're extremely limited to, because we only have 2 licenses. So it becomes very time consuming if you have another hearing to discuss making those changes, and then another hearing to see how the deviation plays out, and then another hearing to have the public weigh in on it.
So what map would you propose?
So I'm not proposing any maps. I'm just saying that my fellow commissioners sound like they want to play around with the software and see what the deviation would make to create a new map that perhaps would satisfy everybody's ideas.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So what I stated earlier, if you don't have to agree with me, but do you understand what I said? Do I have to clarify anything that has been said? Okay, so everybody understands what I said in regards to how we will conduct next week's, not next week's, but the following week's, October 26th, that meeting. Okay. So I want to make sure everybody's on board with that. Okay, great. Okay. That being said, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Commissioner Ma, I motion to adjourn.
Second?
Commissioner Caparose, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.